Here we are. Hey, we're live.
Hi.
Hey, everybody. So I'm super excited today. We have Cassie Marie from No Culty Vibes. So
Yes.
welcome. I've been looking forward to this all week. I've been super stoked. Super
Oh,
stoked.
thank you. I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this too. I heard you talk I think in one of Liz's videos that she did with you maybe, you were talking a little bit about some things you had been a part of and I was like, I wonder. That sounds a little similar to what I was part of. So I've been really looking forward for us to be able to talk about this.
Yeah, and not only when you said Pentecostalism and you said Assemblies of God, I was like, oh, she's from
Mhm.
my mothership. Oh my God.
Yes.
The exact mothership. Yeah. So
Yep.
were you brought up in the Assemblies of God Church, or how did you get involved in it?
No. So my culty story is very multifaceted. And I was not raised in anything. I was raised conservative Christian. My mom's side of the family is Catholic. So I've got a lot of like the Catholic guilt and like a lot of things that come with being raised in Catholicism.
Yeah.
But my dad's side was Methodist. And we were just kind of in and out of churches as a child. And we had issues with several churches. So I saw like a very tumultuous relationship with not religion, but churches.
Yeah.
But my husband was raised very evangelical Christian. He was in and out of different faiths as well, but he was much, much more religious than I was. And he was raised more in a cult and with a lot more religious trauma. I
Right.
met him
Yeah.
in a homeschool camp when I was 16. So I was very young when I got into all of it, just not raised in it. So when we moved away from our families in our early 20s, that's when I joined my very culty church that I was a part of.
And were you homeschooled? You
So,
said you met him in a at a homeschool convention or something?
mhm.
You were
Yes.
homeschooled.
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
Mhm.
But not for religious reasons, or
Nope. I was
okay.
secular homeschool, and I actually homeschool my kids as well, just because my
Mhm.
husband and I were both homeschooled and we liked it.
Mhm.
And I do very secular
Right.
homeschooling,
It's
like much
very,
more
very
mainstream.
right, very different from the Duggars. Yes,
Yes,
definitely. Yeah,
entirely different.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I homeschooled my kids in the cult, until my daughter was 9, but it
Yeah.
was, very d in fact, it was the same curriculum. It was a mixture, we'll go into that later about how, um, there's just all these hybrids of evangelical/fundamental, slash fundamental, especially in the Pentecostal. It's just so, um foo-foo nunu, right? It's just like
It
anything
is.
goes. You can just mix it up and just make your own, your own flavor of religion. It's totally crazy. It is really
Yes.
wild. Wow. Yeah. So
Yeah, so
what were some of the things that are memorable about your experience in the Assemblies of God, right? And where was that? Which congregation, if you don't mind sharing?
yeah, so my church actually came out of the Assemblies of God and said they didn't associate with them anymore by the time that I was part of it. And I didn't actually find out until later when I actually decided to research the group that I was a part of that it was built based in the Assemblies of God. So I went to a church called Morning Star Ministries, and it was started by Rick Joyner. I think in the
Oh yeah, I know who that
90s
is.
is when you know who
Mhm.
Rick Joyner is?
Oh yes. Yes,
Oh, okay.
I do.
Well, yeah. So that's what I went to. I when
Okay.
I tell my story, I like to tell people that I'm an ex-Christian psychic. Of course, as you know, in Pentecostalism and Assemblies of God, that would not be the word that we used to
Oh,
describe
no, that
it.
was evil. I call them
Yes.
mystics, and anything mystical is bad too.
Oh,
Yeah.
so bad,
Mhm,
yes. So that's not what we
mhm.
were called. It was prophetic. By the time I got around to it, that's what kind of the buzzword was in a lot of these Assemblies of God churches. Everyone spoke in tongues, had gifts of the Spirit, like all of that stuff. But I was really into the prophetic, and I was trained in prophetic ministry, and I Yeah, I did. I gave prophecies to people all the time. And they said that they were a non-denominational church. I asked many
I don't
times.
mean to laugh. I'm
No, laugh away. Laugh away. Many times I asked like what denomination we were, and they would say, "Oh, we're non-denominational." And then I was like, "Yes, but you came from somewhere. Like you don't like these are very specific beliefs, like being prophetic,
right.
teaching me how to
Yeah.
prophesy seems like it came from somewhere." And they never told me where. They never said Pentecostal or Assemblies of God or anything. It wasn't until I got out and
Mm,
researched it that I
right.
found that Rick Joyner was part of the Assemblies of
Oh, yeah.
God, and he started Morning Star like out as part of that belief system. One
Yeah.
of the things that really stood out to me now being on the outside of it was that people called us a cult all the time. Like if you
Really?
Google Rick Joyner or Morning Star Ministries or anything like that, it has cult all over it.
Yep.
Tons of people said that we are a cult, and we used to laugh about it all the time and say, if this is a cult, this is the best cult like we could ever be part of. So that's all fine and great. And of course, like I thought it was really cool and great and progressive until it wasn't. Like they definitely put on this front that they have more progressive beliefs. And obviously, I thought because of the prophetic, it was like very different than a lot of the fundamentalist religion that I had seen and that my husband had grown
Mhm.
up in. Turns out the longer you're in it and the more you learn about beliefs, it's not different at
Mhm.
all. It's not progressive at all. You're expected to conform to that level of fundamentalism. And if
Mhm.
you don't, you won't fit in and you won't stay in that community for long.
Right, right. So, I think that you and I could probably be kind of like the Scientologists where we're speaking Pentecostalese the whole time. So I wanna
Yeah.
try, right?
Yes.
So, I wanna try to stop as we go along and, I don't have any official definitions of anything, but just our understanding, and I think, we talked a little bit beforehand, and I think we're on the same page about a lot of things. When you say, prophetic,
Mhm.
what does that mean to you? Prophetic gifts, prophetic I mean, everyone pretty much knows what a prophet is, but,
Mhm.
and they take it to another level in the
They do.
Assemblies of God-ish churches. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So prophetic for us meant that we heard directly from God or from Jesus,
Mhm. Mhm.
and he was directly speaking to us about either words of knowledge, like just knowing things about people that they didn't tell us. Like we could just, the best I can relate it to is being psychic. Like we could pick up on just things about them that they didn't know about themselves. Some people would take it really far and thought that God would give them very specific words, like where this person lived. Like God is all knowing, right? So like God could tell me really anything about you. Or God would just give us words for someone about their future or where they're going in life or things that they can improve on, like almost like a self-help kind of thing. I did prophetic ministry and we had rules. People would come to our church a lot of times for prophetic ministry, and we were supposed to only give them words for their encouragement, edification, and comfort. And we would sit down and we would start by praying either together or on our own. Sometimes we would close our eyes and we would just chat with God and we'd be like, okay, God, give me a word for this person. And then we would either see something in our mind's eye. Some people said they could audibly hear things. Some people said that they could like physically see things or get visions. And then it was our job to like interpret what we were seeing, hearing, feeling, and somehow
Right.
translate that into like an encouraging or uplifting message for the person that we had in front of us.
Now, did you lay hands on them, or was there any, like, touching or weird, like,
Yes,
oil or
often.
anything like that?
Yeah, they especially if they needed healing. So like we might sit there and somebody would get a word from God and say, "Oh, I feel like God is saying that you have back pain. Have you been struggling with back pain lately?"
Mhm.
And who doesn't have back pain, right? So they would be
There's
like, yes,
somebody in
oh
this
my gosh, my back hurts so
congregation
bad. And
with
then we
back
would lay
pain.
hands on them and pray for their back pain and like heal them of back pain. I had been prayed for before and like healed of headaches.
Mhm.
Like someone was like, "Oh, does your head hurt?" And I'd be like, "Yes. I always have a headache because I'm a 20-year-old girl and all I drink are Monsters and iced coffee. And I don't drink any water. So yes, I have a
Agreed.
terrible headache." So they lay hands and, pray for a headache.
And what were the tongues used for? Was there an interpretation, or did people use it for like kind of getting worked up into like a state, like a euphoric happy
Mhm.
state?
Yes. So I never personally spoke in tongues. That was one thing that I don't know why my brain like literally would not let me do it. In our church, tongues weren't usually interpreted because we did prophetic ministry. So we were supposed to be interpreting things all the time. So
Mhm.
nobody like ever got up and preached in tongues and then had someone else interpret or interpreted themselves. They would just ask
Mhm.
God for a word and be constantly interpreting. It was
Right.
I more saw people do it during worship. So, another
Right.
very culty thing about this church is we would worship for at least a minimum of 1 hour before we even heard our sermon for church for that day. So they would play often Hillsong music, which a lot of people don't know that Hillsong was also an Assemblies of God church,
Mhm.
or Bethel music, Bethel in Redding, California. Do you know Bill Johnson? And
Um, no, you do know vineyard music? That's
yes,
probably
Vineyard
is very similar
Church.
to Hillsong. Yep. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, those would any of those songs they would play, they were supposed to be led by the Holy Spirit to even supposed to be led by the Holy Spirit to play the songs. So we would all get very worked up into an emotional state for an
Mhm.
hour plus. And that's when I usually saw people speaking in tongues. And it was very much like the Holy Spirit see all of these people over here speaking in tongues. This is how we know like God is here and his presence is filling the
Right.
room and all of that stuff.
Right. Right, right. And, so though there's no interpretation, it's just everybody kind of babbling whatever comes out of their
Mhm.
mouth, repetitive syllables. That was my experience too. And just,
Yep.
for anyone watching that doesn't know, um, where that comes from as far as biblical, from the Bible, just give a real quick rundown on that is, in the New Testament, there's the second chapter of Acts, where it talks about after Jesus was crucified, rose from the dead, and was ascended into heaven. He told his disciples that he would send the Holy Spirit as a comforter, and that he was leaving them. He's going back to heaven, but he was sending his spirit, which Father, Son, and Holy Ghost are the Trinity, means that they're one. So there's Father, Son, the Holy Spirit was sent to the earth to um, be a comforter, to minister, to like what you were saying, to
Mhm.
heal and all this stuff. So what happened was the 12 disciples were in what's called the upper room in a house, and they're sitting around on the day of Pentecost, which that's where Pentecostal comes from. It was a Jewish feast, and all of a sudden there was like a wind through the room, as the story goes. There were tongues of fire dancing over their heads, and they just like started speaking in different, they say tongues, but different languages, actual
Mhm.
languages. And they spilled out into the street, and they just started preaching the gospel to all these people in their native tongue. So it was an actual language. Now, fast
Mhm.
forward a few thousand years, right? The tradition of the Apostolic Church, the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, there wasn't much mention of
Nope.
tongues, right? And then when you had the early 1900s in America, of course, when the uh the Reformation started, all the Great Awakening, the first awakening came in, and all of a sudden everybody starts speaking in tongues. But guess what?
Mhm.
nobody understood it because it was
Nope.
just one of those emotional manifestations. It was supposed to be an outward manifestation, an outward sign that the Holy Spirit was inside of you. So, it kind of didn't gain a huge amount of traction until the charismatic movement. So you have
Mhm.
that was where I was kind of born into that.
Yep.
I didn't enter that whole sphere until I was about 9 years, 8, 9 years old. Um, my my birth parents, my dad wasn't really in the scene. My mother, my biological mother, she was like, I think she went to the Salvation Army a few times. I mean, she liked to sing and she sort of was a Christian, but unfortunately, she passed away in a house fire when I was 5.
Oh,
So
I'm so
I
sorry.
and three of my siblings. Thank you. It's been 47 years now. So yeah,
Mhm.
but yeah, it was pretty tragic, and I really tragic, and I didn't have like nobody had custody of me. So from age
Wow.
5 to almost 9, I was a professional couch hopper. So
Yeah.
suffered a lot of abuse. I didn't have really a home. And
Mhm.
finally, after 4 years, um, Child Protective Services stepped in, put me in a foster home with 9 other children, and they were a Pentecostal family. And my adoptive
Mhm.
mom was basically born on the pew of Bethel Church. So Bethel
Wow.
Pentecostal Church was an Assemblies of God. Grew up there. I was scared to death because I had never been in a church like that or any.
Mhm.
I don't remember been in any church, and they were yelling and jumping around and
Mm.
speaking in tongues, casting out demons. People were
Mhm.
frothing at the mouth. I mean, I don't know how it was in your church, but it was like this was in the 70s, late 70s, and everybody was just worked up into a frenzy. They were running around. It was insane.
Yeah.
And some of it was sort of fun and funny, like, they would have puppet
Mhm.
shows for us, we'd go on trips. I mean, they tried to make it fun, but it was very weird because even though we were in public school, we weren't allowed to, like, be like the other kids. So they'd always have to
Right.
have, like, a replacement for Halloween, replacement for music, replacement for dances. I wanted to go, roller skating. I couldn't because there was rock music. So there was always this, in the world, but not of it kind of thing. But I
Right.
think the most
Yep.
dark,
I know
horrible
that term very well.
yeah. See, yeah, no, we could go through the whole thing, I know.
Yeah.
But one of the most insidiously horrible, scary things as a child growing up in that church was the fear of the rapture, the fear of the
Mhm.
tribulation. We would watch this was before the Left Behind series, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but,
Mhm.
we had these horrible, scary movies that we had to watch about people getting can't even say it on YouTube probably, but
Yeah.
people that didn't take the mark of the beast. If you missed the rapture, you had to get martyred or you were going to HE double two sticks. So I just
Right.
remember, being 10, 11 years old, feeling, trying to imagine what it would be like to literally burn forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. You know,
Mhm.
it was just traumatic. And it's just something that
Yeah.
like it was just like a Tuesday morning, like, no big deal. You can always
Yeah.
if you miss the
Yes.
rapture. And I always felt like, if I always felt like I was never gonna measure up. I was definitely gonna have to, get curtains. So I was just trying to
No.
feel it, think of, "Oh, what would that feel like? Well, I hope they put a bag over my." I mean, it was that bad. It was seriously, I
Yeah.
would, like, lay awake and think about it at night. And I knew
Oh
that
my
I
god.
wasn't, you know but then as a teenager, I just decided that I didn't wanna be a Pentecostal anymore, I didn't wanna be a Christian anymore, and I really wanted to go to prom. I wasn't allowed to go to prom. I was coming up on my senior year, and I ran away from home, and
Wow.
I ended up in a home for, troubled teens,
Mhm.
and I laugh about it now because, like, I wasn't, like, doing I wasn't, like,
You
stealing,
were troubled.
I just wanted
Yeah.
to go to prom. I just wanted to go to
Yeah.
prom.
Yes, which,
I just
like,
wanted
who
to
what high schooler doesn't wanna go to prom? Like, that's a literal, normal, universal experience and desire to have.
Yeah, I just wanted to be like the other kids, and
Yeah.
so went to prom. I aged out of foster care, and then I ended up homeless for a while again, couch hopping again, and,
Mhm.
then I took off to Cape Cod for a while, sowed my oats, went a little crazy, wild crazy. Got that all out of my system. Then I came back to live with my parents when I was 20, and that was with the understanding that I was going to have to go back to church with them. But this was a new church. It wasn't crazy. There wasn't any slaying in the spirit. Oh, there's another slaying in the spirit. There wasn't all
Oh,
the
yep.
crazy miracles and nuts stuff, because it was led by a woman who was a Bible teacher. She
Mhm.
had gone to the Bill Gothard seminars many, many times. So, yes, so this was a combination of crazy charismatic Christians and
Wow.
the Duggar type. Yes, but I didn't know at the
IBLT
time. It
Bill
sounded
Gothard.
legit. Sounds
Yeah.
legit, right? Like, oh,
Mhm.
we're gonna really delve into the Bible. We're gonna get serious about God. And I was 20. I didn't know what the hell I was gonna do with my life. And
Mhm.
so she was starting up a live-in ministry. So there were 12 of us that ended up living in the building. It was a beautiful old inn in it's up the
Wow.
street actually. I still live in the same town. Um and it was a beautiful old inn built in the 1700s, gorgeous, beautiful inn. And so 12 of us, most of us were in our early 20s. My
Mhm.
future husband lived there. He was in his early 30s. We're 12 years apart. And at first, it was really fun. Love bombing galore, right? And
Yep.
then about a year in, it started to get really dark and horrible. And the whole umbrella of authority, the uh, but it was also still Pentecostal casting out demons. Like, she lied
Right.
because she still wasn't the mysticism. She was a
Mhm.
prophetess. The only reason why she could hybrid the IBLP stuff, even though she was a woman, is she said that it was like Deborah in the Bible. Remember the judge Deborah?
Mhm.
She was an exception to the rule, because there were no other men that were qualified to lead God's flock in our area of Vermont.
Wow.
Yeah. So
The
she
mental
basically
gymnastics.
I know. Oh, yeah. Totally, totally. So she basically stole about a congregation of 50 people, plus all their extended family, but it was mostly like
Mhm.
divorcee women and mostly women, few men. But she basically went and plucked out, started having these home Bible studies in 3 different Assemblies of God churches, and started her own cult. And I
Wow.
lived in the building for almost 6 years. Um, we were celibate. We had to fast for days and days and days on end. I never made it to the
Oh
10-day
my goodness.
fast. I was only
Mhm.
one of 2. My husband and I were the only ones working outside the building too. But we were like
Mm.
kind of like the Sea Org. Like, I laugh, but
Mhm.
we'd have to like shine all the pews and with ammonia water. We
Wow.
had to we couldn't even hold hands with each other. I mean, my husband and I, did sneak a couple kisses before we got married. But yeah,
Oh my
and we
goodness.
weren't virgins, right?
Scandal.
I know. Well, he had relationships, and so did I, but once we moved to Door of Hope, that was it.
Yeah.
So, can you
Yeah.
imagine, 12 young people in their 20s and 30s not even, holding hands?
Mhm.
But we would be laying on our faces in our rooms, crying out to God about our sins. It was insane, and people
Yeah.
did go insane. 3 people actually had mental breakdowns, and one of them was hospitalized. It was terrible. It was really, really bad. And finally we got married. I'm trying to just tell you quickly, my background with this is that we got married, and of course, can't even hold hands. Now it's like populate the earth, right? So now we have to have all these kids, which we only had 3. Am I frozen or are you, Cass? We frozen? All right, I'll just keep talking, but I'm not sure if I'm frozen or she is. Okay. All right. Yeah, so it was just crazy. And then when we had kids, we were expected. I think she can bring herself back in. Did you kick yourself out, Cass? Okay, she's frozen. All right. She can bring herself back in. But yeah, if anyone has any questions or anything, we're just trying to like share our story plus give a little bit of a background in Pentecostalism as we experienced it. And I just yeah, Cassie, come back. We miss you. I want to take the opportunity to say that um, neither Cassie nor I are saying that all Pentecostal churches are cults. Pentecostalism in its entirety is a cult. Uh, we both do agree that it can be breeding grounds for cults, and especially with the prophetic anointing kind of nature of it. So we're just giving our experience. So um, yeah, so we're here, and she's coming back in. I think there she is. She's coming. Yay! There you
Hey,
are. I didn't know if I
sorry.
was frozen. Well, I have really, like, bad internet here in the holler, so I didn't know if it was me. So I'm just talking away, and I see you're frozen. I'm like, "Maybe I'm the one that's frozen."
Oh, no. No, you're good. I also kind of live out a little ways, and it's windy here right now, and
Oh,
wind
yeah, that'll do
because the
it.
hurricane that just came through. So the
Yeah.
wind is like awful
Are you
for
near the
the
coast
internet.
or
Close to the
Yeah.
coast. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we didn't get touched by the hurricane. Like we didn't get the major hurricane coming through, but we have like all the outer wind and light rain and
Right,
stuff that
right,
sometimes knocks me out, but hopefully it will be good.
right. So, I I was just kinda giving an overview of my experience, but, just to kinda weave in something I wanted to ask you is
Yeah.
what when you were in the or in Rick Joyner's church, were you,
Mhm.
exposed to, like did they kind of leave behind the whole demon casting out demons and demon possession thing, or was that a thing?
It was a thing. So I was actually really lucky in a lot of ways with Rick Joyner's church because I went to the campus in Wilmington, North Carolina, and Morning Star Ministries. We called it the mothership, like where Rick Joyner preached, which is
Right,
in
yep.
Fort Mill, South Carolina. So I was like one step removed from actually listening to Rick Joyner himself preach. He would come to our campus often and give sermons, but we had a different pastor that had been through prophetic ministry school at Morning Star and had gotten like a master's in like theology. And our pastor was European and had a lot of different ideas than Rick Joyner because Rick is very like very Americanized versions of Assembly of God and
Yeah.
Pentecostalism, and European versions of this are very different. So
Mhm.
I was spared from some of the worst of it, although I was harmed in that church. It took a while for me to realize it and a while to unpack because some of the worst things and like really crazy things we didn't experience because my pastor had very different views on it. So we had a guest speaker one time actually come and preach on casting out demons and praying like demons out of people. And they prophetically they wrote a book about it called like Breaking the Chains or something. And they
Mm.
prophetically handed out this book to random people that God told them would cast demons out of people. And I was one of the people in
Oh,
the congregation that was handed this book. So I was exposed to it a little bit. I read a little bit about it, but because I wasn't raised in it and because I was sheltered from some of the worst things, it freaked me out a little bit. Like I was reading it and they were talking about the different things that are demons and like the different they would call it inroads,
mhm,
like through your eyes and your
mhm.
ears are how demons get into a person. So if you watch like secular TV and listen to secular music, you could potentially expose yourself to demons. And it freaked me out. Like I was so panicked by it and I was like, I can't do the demon stuff. Like I
Yeah, yeah.
can't do it.
Yeah, I think that in my, uh, church cult, it was used almost like a control thing. It was like, "Oh, that's the
Mhm.
devil lying to you," or "That's the demon of this or that," and,
Oh, yes.
it was just a way to, like, get you paranoid that, oh, if you have a thought, if you have a doubt or something, that's the devil. That's not that's not really your inner person saying, "Hey, this is wrong. This isn't
They did do a
okay."
lot of that.
It's like,
Yeah.
that's just the devil,
Yes,
Yeah.
I very much in that church, something that I had to unpack was how much I learned to disconnect from myself
Yeah.
and like my own intuition and my own feelings. I learned how to be really distrustful of my own feelings and
Mhm.
think that things are the devil in my ear or demonic. And over time, that just led to me questioning every single thought I had and like not knowing like is this a thought that's going to harm me, is this god, is this jesus, is this the devil, is it me being bad, is it me being good, like it was like yeah, there was a lot of that
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah, and it can literally drive you insane, and
Yeah.
especially if you have like, I was wondering about the structure, the elder structure. So you had the minister, you had your
Uh-huh.
pastor. Did you have, like, deacons, elders, anything
No,
like that?
our small congregation had we had leaders. We had the main pastor and we had an assistant pastor, and then they had formed kind of their own little group of leadership that would mentor other people that were learning prophetic ministry or would lead like women's group and men's group and would host like different workshops, but it was very like unorganized. It wasn't like an official eldership structure or deacon structure. And I don't know that Rick Joyner had that either at the main
Mhm,
campus. I think it was
mhm.
mostly just him, like making rules and
Yeah,
teaching
yeah.
people things.
Charismatic leader, yeah.
Mhm.
Aaron's asking, "Are you talking about Mormons, Cassie?"
Nope.
We could be, but we're not. No, we're not.
I know. This all overlaps so much just because of the
Does, yeah.
Christian undertones, but, I
Mhm.
went to a church called Morning Star Ministries started by Rick Joyner, and it came out of the Assemblies of God, but was non-denominational, if anyone asked.
Yeah. And yeah, that non-denominational thing, that is another whole sweeping, like, I can't remember, it was probably a couple months ago that I looked it up, but pretty sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Assemblies of God, it's all over the world, but I can't
Mhm.
remember if it's 3,000 congregations, 3,000, actual just Assemblies of God churches. Is it in the United States or the whole world? I'm not sure, but, they're professed to have millions of members, and I
Yes.
completely, completely believe it. And, like we had just touched on earlier, before we came live, was that, uh, the Assemblies of God is, while it's the largest, denomination of Pentecostals, there's many others that
Mhm.
are, also, Church of God, and can't think of the others just off the top of my head. I would consider Vineyard and Morning Star and things like that,
Yep.
but also all these little offshoots, and that's what my church, nobody ever heard of it, Door of Hope, it came from. There's lots of Door of Hopes. There are thousands of them, and a lot of
Right.
them came out of that charismatic movement, which beget the Assemblies of God. A lot of ex-Catholics, all kind of Baptists and
Mhm.
Methodists and stuff went to these seminars and conventions and revivals, and got into the Pentecostal thing. Some of them went more fundamental, which is where the church, that the second church I was in, the cult that I lived at,
Mhm.
that was more of a fundamental, more like rigid rules. And then you had the more charismatic, but yeah, mine was a total hybrid. It was pretty crazy, pretty crazy.
Yeah, when you were mentioning that yours was mixed with, like, Bill Gothard and IBLP,
Mhm,
I remember watching Shiny Happy People, the docuseries on the Duggars and Bill Gothard
mhm,
and IBLP, and
mhm.
at one point, a survivor of the IBLP said that Bill Gothard created this system that allowed every father to be a cult leader and
Yes.
every family to be a cult. And that
Mhm.
really resonated with me because as I researched my church after I left, I feel like Assemblies of God is kind of this huge conglomerate that enabled every pastor to be
Yeah.
a cult leader and every church to be a cult. It
Mhm.
was very similar, but more in a group setting versus a family setting. So I can only imagine with you being in that situation with that woman who had a little bit of the Bill Gothard, a little bit of the Assemblies of
Yeah.
God. That sounds like a terrible mixture of like never being
Well,
able to escape the
yeah, because she could morph into any
horn.
she was like a
Yeah.
shapeshifter, you know? She could just be like,
Yes.
take from here, take from there, and whatever was convenient. But something about, the Bill Gothard Ministries is he never professed to be a church or a minister. He was a Christian educator. So,
Mhm.
when he was young, he got a master's in Christian education from Wheaton College, and then, he started these youth ministries and everything that turned into the IBLP. But my husband calls he just like labels things. I'm like, you know what? You're absolutely right. He calls Bill Gothard Ministries the smart bomb of Christianity.
That's
One of them,
hilarious.
anyways.
Yeah.
The reason is because there are, I guess, 2 million alumni of Bill Gothard seminars. So in the 70s and early 80s, he would rent out stadiums and have literally from 10 to 20,000 people taking his seminars about
Mhm.
the umbrella of authority, about all of this, the man of the household and all this stuff. And the women, all these things. He talked about all of the authority structure and about being submissive and giving up your soul to God, your mind, your
Mhm.
will, your emotions. I remember a lot of it like it was yesterday. But
Yeah.
we never paid money to the IBLP. We didn't claim to be IBLP. We were non-denominational. We were a door of hope, and
Right.
us 50 people were the only people that had the truth. We were the only one
Yep.
true church, by the way. By the way, just in case
Yep.
you're wondering, right? And so what happened was you got 2 million people that actually sat their butts in the seats and went and took them. But they had friends, they had family, they had kids, they had grandkids,
Mhm.
they had churches. They just went and got the virus and just spread it all around.
Yep.
So you had this morphing thing. You got the charismatic movement doing the exact same thing. You had Jim and
Yes.
Tammy Baker with PTL and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That was the charismatic movement. And then
So
they just
sorry, go
were a
ahead.
perfect marriage of cults.
So, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. Jim Baker had a Christian water park. Did you know this? Did you know his Yeah.
Yes, I
So
had
that's probably
people in
how
my
you
church bought some of the timeshares that didn't exist.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so if you don't know
Yes.
what I'm talking about, hopefully you know if you're in the culty world, hopefully you know who Jim and Tammy Faye Baker are because they were very, very famous televangelists back in Maryland. You might have to help me with this. When were
Uh,
they? In the
Mid to late
70s?
80s. It was they were in
80s?
the
Okay.
80s. Yeah, I was in high school and at the height of their with Tammy
Yeah.
Faye Baker with her eyelashes got longer and longer and longer and makeup got, drag
Yeah.
queens love to dress up as Tammy Faye Baker.
She was such an icon. Like, she was such
She
an
was.
icon.
'Cause
And,
she had her own studio, she had her own
yeah.
TV, channels. She couldn't sing, but she did sing, she would
Yeah.
just sit up there and insane.
Yes.
80s, right,
So in the
Michelle?
80s, Jim Baker, before he went to jail for fraud, he
Yeah,
bought a Christian water park. And he built out this whole, like, it was supposed to be Disney for Christians, and
yep,
it was like this amusement water park thing in Fort Mill, South Carolina, which
yep,
is right under Charlotte, North Carolina. And they sold a bunch of timeshares to
it's
people,
a
and
nest.
they sold like lifetime memberships and like all this stuff. And it was supposed to be like good, clean family fun for you to come to this Christian Disney. So you didn't have to go to Disney World and get corrupted by the demons in Mickey Mouse.
Right.
And when Jim
These are
Baker went
Christian
to jail
demons,
because
yeah.
he defrauded a bunch of people over these
Mhm.
timeshares and couldn't like keep up the maintenance of the water park and all of that stuff, he had to sell the water park, and Rick Joyner bought what was left of the water park and the timeshare buildings, and that is Morningstar Ministries. That is the culty church that I was a part
Wow.
of,
I
and
didn't know it
that
was the exact
building.
location, wow.
Yep.
I believe it.
It's at the water
Mhm.
park, and the timeshare building is still there, And the town or the city of Fort Mill has been fighting with Rick Joyner for years because it is a giant tower and it is ugly. It is so ugly and it's run down. Like it's not
Yeah.
since I think in the 90s is when Rick Joyner bought it, and he's never renovated it. He had plans to make it like a retirement community for Christians and like do a similar like fraudulent thing. But I don't know if he never quite got enough money to renovate it or what, but it's still there and the town fights with him about it all the time because it's so ugly and they
Wow.
want it torn down so bad and he won't do it.
That's insane. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I didn't know that part of the story. Man, just a saga. Just a saga.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah. I
never
remember
ending.
all the excitement about it. Like I said, when I was growing up and it was like, let's have a replacement. Like, we're we don't like Disney because of their demons. Yeah, we could because of the magic involved. It's funny when you were talking about how, things like the psychic thing and stuff. Oh my God, we could not have Ouija boards. I couldn't watch the
No.
Smurfs. The Smurfs because a wizard was in it, right? I couldn't
Yeah.
watch. Yeah, yeah. So we couldn't watch Disney because there were witches and
Mhm.
wizards and magic and all that. Yeah, so yeah, you had to have replacements of it, but it's just insane. But yeah, so when you were kind of in the thick, you were anointed as a prophetess,
Mhm.
right? So
Yep.
you like what was that like, and how did you start to realize that this isn't like I was never a prophetess. I was more of
Yeah.
a floor sweeper. Like I wasn't anointed as a prophetess at all. I just sat in the
Yeah,
corner and
so
crocheted.
it was
I just crocheted blankets and stuff
I
and
love
scrubbed
that.
floors.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I think people ask me all the time because I don't really identify as Christian anymore, and I'm more agnostic, and I kind of with things that I'm learning have been fluctuating between like atheism and Gnosticism, and I'm into science lately because I like tangible things that I can prove or
Right.
disprove these days.
Mhm.
Just because of all the trauma. I'm not saying like that's the right or wrong way to be at all. I totally get where faith plays a role. A lot of my friends have deconstructed from like this church and this kind of Christianity and are still Christian. And I think that's perfectly valid. But people ask me all the time, like, what do I think I was doing? Like, how do you go from believing you're psychic to like not believing in being psychic? And
Right,
I
right,
don't know really how to explain what I was doing other than I think that we all have some level of intuition. I think I learned later in life that I had ADHD. So I think I was really good on picking up on patterns with people
right.
and figuring out, like, just kind of getting their vibe and knowing kind of what things they like and didn't like. I don't have explanations for how I heard certain words about people, but truthfully, I was only ever right like a certain percentage of the time, right? Like there was we never expected. It's funny because God is all knowing and we believe that we're hearing from God, but we also believed in like human error. So if we got something wrong, it's because we heard wrong. It was like our humanness that heard wrong. So it's not like I was so psychic that I was always right about people
Mhm,
and never got anything wrong. It's just that if you're constantly telling people things about themselves, you're bound to guess right sometimes, right? Like you're bound
mhm.
to get something correct or something like I had kind of alluded to this earlier, something like back pain and headaches. Who doesn't have back pain? Like if
Right,
someone
yeah,
over the age of
exactly,
30
yeah.
comes into your church, whose back doesn't hurt sometimes? Like who doesn't get headaches regularly? Like these are common things that people deal with. I actually, I guess I'll briefly share the thing that harmed me the most and made me realize that I was in a cult was I got into the business side of things. A lot of charismatic assemblies of God, people like that are like Jim Baker, where they're really into businesses and money and prosperity
Right.
gospel.
Yep.
And
Oh, yeah.
I
That's
got
another big
into like the
point.
business
Yeah.
coaching area, yeah, and like wanting to be an entrepreneur. And the business coaching world was very mixed with new age spirituality, but just enough. New Age spirituality is often very similar to like fundamentalist Christianity.
Mhm,
There are a lot of like
mhm,
parallels you can tie there. And so I got
mhm,
into this where it was just similar enough that I was feel like I was primed for this. And I met a girl who went to Bethel in Redding, California. Bill Johnson was Assemblies of God. He went to the Toronto Blessings, which was like a big Pentecostal revival. And he
mhm.
started Redding out in Bethel. They're very famous for their worship music nowadays, almost as famous as Hillsong, and they've had a lot of controversies over the years of some of their more harmful spiritual practices that they do. And but Morningstar and Bethel are very like, we considered each other like of the same cloth, I guess.
Mhm.
And I met a business coach that was a student at Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. I met her as she gave me like prophetic words about business and money. I started paying her money and working with her as a coach, thousands of dollars, and was trying to be a coach myself and have people pay me thousands of dollars to work with me. It was all very complicated
So
and
like an
convoluted.
MLM, kinda like an
Yes,
MLM
very
there.
MLM. Yes.
Wow.
Yep. And I actually was in an MLM when I was 18. So before the church, before
Mhm,
this situation, I was a Mary Kay consultant for a number of years and before I gave that up. And this business coach was 100% like, I was in the baby phases of a cult, and I believe she was a malignant narcissist. She was very abusive, and I went through a period of time where she was giving me words from God, and I wasn't hearing from God myself. Sometimes I would
mm.
still hear from other people, but she was the one like giving me mentorship and words and all of this stuff, and it was very money oriented. And through her, I met someone who's now my best friend, who was also being manipulated and abused by her. And we ended up on my friend's farm. This girl brought other people to this farm, and she was like, she would prophesy and say, I see thousands of entrepreneurs coming to this farm that we're going to help, that we're going to help grow businesses. And Cassie, we're going to use your marketing and your art skills. And Andy, we're going to use
Mm.
your farm and these skills and hospitality. And she was trying to build a commune and a cult. It sounds very similar to what you were a part of.
Yeah.
And again, she
Mm.
was out of this Bethel, like spiritual
Yeah.
Pentecostal Assemblies of God. And it got to the point where I was so broke, and my husband and I had quit our jobs with this promise of like business coaching. We had a 1-year-old daughter, and we were just living by the spirit, like trying to build a business and make a way and trust God for our
Mhm.
provision and all this stuff. And I got so broke. Like we ran out of money. We had no prospects, no promises of anything. And my friend Andy and I had to sit down with each other and actually start unpacking. Hey, did this lady tell you this? She told me this. And oh, she was telling me this. And we started like unpacking that.
Mhm.
And we didn't have
Mm.
language for it, but we just
Right,
knew it was a bad
right.
situation. And we
Yeah,
finally got
yeah.
the courage to cut her off
Good.
and kick her and a couple of the other people off the farm. And me and my now friend had to learn that we were victims of narcissistic abuse. And
Mhm.
through Scientology in the aftermath, I know you've shared as well that Scientology was like a big
Yeah,
thing for you and
totally.
understanding things that you were a part of. I
Mhm.
started breaking down that particular situation that was very harmful to me. And after learning about cults and learning about that, that's when I was able to look at the church that I was a part of and go, oh, oh no,
Right.
that was a cult too.
Yeah.
And oh,
Mhm,
prophecy can mean this and it can mean that. And I had to,
mhm.
that's when I started thinking, like, okay, what was I a part of? What was I actually doing when I was prophesying to people? How did I actually believe this? Because as I unpacked it, I started just really not believing in any of it anymore. Um,
Right.
and yeah, it's just been, and this was only, I cut her off in like 2018, at the end of 2018. So it's only been like 3 or 4 years. And in those 3 or 4 years, I've learned every single thing that I can about cults and cult psychology. And it's been a journey trying to figure out what happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean,
Mhm.
being, able to just glean from all these different experiences. Like a lot of people are, will say, even some of the Scientologists, like, you guys are never in. Like, I can't believe you're here, watching us. I'm
Mhm.
like, hey, we can relate. We really, really can
And,
relate a lot of it.
I think we like Scientology so much and this SPTV community so much because, and I don't wanna say this, we have a long way to go with Scientology. There's still so much that we need to expose. There's still so many people that need to be held accountable. So I don't want to diminish that in any way. But as far as I think public awareness, because this is America and Scientology isn't Christian, it's been a little bit easier for this like community to come together and for the general public, I think a little more to understand that it is a cult and that
Mhm.
like these abuses did happen. Of course, like I said, there's still
Yeah.
so much to learn and a long way to go, but I think for you and I, like there's not really a community of people talking about Assemblies of God. Like the IBLP
Um,
just got their documentary. They just
yeah.
got their exposure, and the Duggars have
Yeah.
been famous forever, for years and years and years.
Mhm.
And so, like, Scientology has done for us what we don't have for ourselves yet. And I think we will get
Yeah.
there. And I think that
There's
there's even
there's one
more than just
channel.
Assemblies of God and IBLP,
Oh,
and you're
totally.
gonna start learning more about it. But yeah, I think that's why we stick around and we love the SPTV community and we love learning about Scientology because for so many of us, it was our way out. It was our way to deconstruct, and seeing slowly people getting justice over time, I think is
Yeah.
it gives us hope. It gives me hope.
Yeah. Definitely. And I I have a couple thoughts about that as well as like there is one channel that I really like, but I can't watch it much just because the language can be a little triggering is Myth Vision. It's Derek Lambert. Have you ever heard of him? He's got
Mm-mm.
a YouTube channel, and he was a
Okay.
Pentecostal, and, he was on Cults to Consciousness, like, speaking in tongues, and I'm like, "Hey, that sounds like, one of the" just joking of, like, I used to say,
Yeah.
I'm like, "Hey, somebody in my congregation used to have the same tongues."
Yeah.
But, yeah, he he's great. He's just really, great to listen to. He's been on Andrew Gold and stuff too, but I've watched his channel a few times, but he has guests that are on that some are like a little bit like theologian, like apologetic type people that like
Mhm.
just some of the language can be triggering to me. And
Yeah.
I found Scientology really the anti-Scientology movement, ex-Scientologists to be so relatable and just easy to like to relate to my situation and
Mhm.
to empathize with without totally going down the rabbit hole of all these triggering language,
Yes.
all that stuff. Like the Scientology language, it doesn't trigger me. I just kind of laugh at it. But I'm like,
Yes.
oh, that's weird. Like auditing was kind of like this for us. It was like we had to do
Mhm.
these repentance sessions and things and confession sessions and we'd have to sit in a chair and we get hands laid on us and they'd be like, you have a spirit of Achan, which was like this horrible story in the Bible of hiding idols under your tent. And everything was an idol too.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if in your church, like my kids were an idol. And then when
Yeah.
my daughter was actually 7 years old and they started trying to cast demons out of her, telling me that she had a devil of Jezebel at 7 years old.
Oh, no,
Jezebel,
no, no, no,
she's
no.
7 years old,
Yeah.
right?
That would make me so
And
mad.
I wish I just grabbed her and ran out of there. I mean,
Yeah. It's
it's one
hard
of the
though.
deepest regrets of my life, but I had nothing. That's all I knew, and oh, I think I saw oh, hi, Joni. I think I saw Liz Gale.
Yeah, I was
Hey,
actually just gonna
darling.
mention Liz, like, I literally was gonna
Hi.
bring her up, and then I saw her comment, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's here to hear me talk
Yeah.
about her." Because I was gonna say that Liz and I have, like, talked about this as well, where I think that she and I connect so well and get along so well and can talk to each other because our language in our cult is different enough. It's like similar enough that we get each other, and it's different
Right,
enough that we're not constantly triggering each other
right.
like by our own
Right.
experience.
And other people can understand too, because just like,
Yeah.
we were saying earlier, that you and I was like, okay, I don't want to get in the weeds of talking Pentecostalese, just the
Yeah.
Scientologies, because I I've had with these after parties that we do after Aaron streams on Monday night. So there's a few times where we've had two ex Pentecostals, ex Scientologists on the same time, and they're just like talking this same language, and I can follow it because I've listened to all of them for so long.
Yeah.
But they really, it's on like speed dial. It's so funny listening to them.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
why I was
I
like,
can
okay, you had a prophet. Okay, let's like break it down for
Thank
anybody
you
that
for
doesn't
doing that
know.
because I forget all the time too, and, like, I don't always know, like, which words to explain and which words, like, are more common 'cause, like, that's part of the cult too is, like, sometimes you don't even know, like, which words are
Yeah.
used in, like, regular language and
Yeah, it's
which
just
words
real
are just
like
entirely
yeah, I think, unfortunately, I think that Pentecostalism just dials everything up. Like everyone knows what a prophet is supposed to be, but
Yeah,
there's a whole level
but
of that
yeah,
prophetic
it's a whole
calling.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And that just some of the teachings like about the rapture. I mean, was that ever I mean, I think I asked earlier, but I didn't quite um I was talking too much. I didn't get
Yeah.
your input on that. Was that something that was really emphasized in
No,
early?
we were not, like, super into the rapture, but some people were very end times oriented and, like, end times focused because we were evangelical, and
Mhm.
the part of prophetic ministry that I always had a problem with, but didn't know why I had a problem with it, was that we would street evangelize with our prophetic words. So, we would go often to Walmart because the Christians think that everyone in Walmart needs ministry, which I don't know. There may be some truth to that. But we would
Do they need to
often
get out of their
go
pajamas?
Yes, we would go to Walmart and we would, as like part of our training, we would have to ask God. And this is part of why Bethel and Reading gets in so much trouble all the time because Bethel students just do this around town and they're menaces. Like they are menaces to this small town in California because they go
Yeah.
out and street evangelize all the time. I will rant. I get mad about it.
Oh,
But
no,
we would
I totally get it. I hated that. Oh my god. I
Yeah,
did like
we would go out and we would
I
ask
know.
God, "Okay, God, who do you
Did you
want
have
me to give a
tracts to
prophetic
hand
word?"
out? Did you have tracts to hand
No, we
out?
didn't have tracks.
Oh, I loved tracts because you could just be like, "Want one? Okay, I ministered to that person because I handed them a tract."
Yeah, we weren't that lucky. Nope, we
Oh,
had to give people prophetic words. We had to go up to people. We had to ask God, "Who do you want me to minister to?" We would get words like black t-shirt or young woman or like we would get random things and so we would have to go find someone that met that description and then we would be like okay God what do you want me to tell them and then we'd get a prophetic word and then we'd have to go up to a stranger in Walmart who's trying to buy some groceries and say hi I'm part of this like thing and we believe that God is alive and he still talks to people and he wants me to minister to you right now and I feel like you have been struggling with blah 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 and I just want to tell you that there's hope and like we would have to give this whole spiel and I like wanted to puke every time we had to do this and
yeah.
sometimes I would just outright refuse and like people would have to like give me pep talks and like try to figure out why what demon was in me like why I couldn't do it 'cause
Okay,
I
well,
was just
that sounds like a cult. Sounds like a
yeah
cult. Yeah. We
yeah
were
for
trying to be
sure
charitable, but that's a goddamn cult right there.
I
Um,
know.
yeah. Have you ever seen the documentary Jesus Camp?
Yeah, a long time
The little
ago, but I
kids?
don't remember much of it.
There's a scene in there in a bowling alley, and there was a little girl, I don't know, maybe 12 years old. She poor girl. She just,
Mm,
like, came up to this woman and was just drinking her Coke and putting on her bowling shoes, and she's just like, "Excuse me, but, God told me that, he just wanted me to tell you that he really loves you and he has a plan for your life, and,
mhm.
um, yeah, so, I think that's it. Yeah, so she was so nervous, but she was so driven to do it. And
Yeah,
she didn't really have anything to say, but she was just like practicing, you know. And then
yeah.
she went running back up to her dad and he's like, "Good job." It was like
That
I don't know if it was just
that makes me wanna throw up.
nuts. Yeah,
Like, when
terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about
Like
getting the
little
kids
kids.
involved,
Yeah. Yeah, and
I
they
get
sent them
really
this
weepy about it.
camp where they were all doing the
Mhm.
speaking in tongues and the gyrations and the prophet stuff, and then they had the puppet shows and yeah, this
Mhm.
one woman, she was reminded me of my cult leader, but yeah, it really does get them to receive things at such an early age that when
Mhm.
they're adults, how can you process all this? It's like I'm so
Right.
glad there are people speaking out. There's more education out there. It's going to take probably a lifetime to really unpack all of everything that has happened to these kids and even to
Yeah.
our experiences. Just yeah, if we can help, I would say if we can help one person, it sounds a little
Yeah.
bit cliche, but that's really how I feel,
Yeah,
that
same.
just
Same.
speaking out
And just
about
for
it.
people to know, like, they're not alone and, like, they're
Yeah,
not I left my cult with this feeling that I left with a lot of shame. That, like, there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't hack it,
right.
that I went about leaving the wrong way, that, like, I did something wrong to cause this level of distress in my life that I needed to leave. Um, I had a lot of shame around, like, not being able to evangelize and not being able to speak in tongues and just, like, these little random things. I felt like I was the problem. Like, I felt like something was wrong with me. So,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah,
my drive is if, we can help one person even realize, "Hey, that wasn't my fault. I was
yeah,
highly coerced
yeah.
and manipulated into believing
Mhm.
in a few very specific things that led me to do A, B, and C, and that wasn't my fault." And we can take accountability for the harm that we caused others in that
Right,
situation, but at the
right.
same time realize that we were under such a fog of like different beliefs that like you're not a bad person and there's nothing wrong with
Right,
you. And it was
right.
good to leave that situation. And you were right to listen to yourself and get out and, start your process of healing. So that's a big driver for
Right.
me as well.
Right, that's good, that's great, and, like, when you were talking about earlier about you possibly being, like, agnostic or I think maybe that's it's I just what I know is that I don't know, you know what I mean, you know?
Same.
So,
Yes.
maybe that makes me agnostic, but I think some of my religious experiences where I just knew that was God, it could have been the chemicals in my brain, the dopamine, like,
Yeah.
coming out of a church service and just feeling so pumped, and then having to
Mhm.
go back and get that other hit of it, and I really legitimately thought that was the Holy Spirit doing that.
Yeah.
But I go to a
Same.
rock concert, had nothing to do like, I go see my boys play, they have a band, and I get the same feeling. I'm like, "Well, is that God?" And
Yeah.
everybody seems to have that, and I'm not saying really there is room for faith. I'm not saying that religion is just chemicals in your body, but I'm just saying in my own experience, it's been really hard for me to separate that. So I've had,
Yeah.
I still have my adopted family is Christian, and there's this thing of like, oh, don't throw the baby out, don't throw the baby Jesus out with the bathwater, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I kind of maybe need to just to
Yeah.
clear it out and just say, all right, what do I believe? I believe in being a good
Mhm.
person for one thing. I believe in having compassion. I believe,
Yeah.
what do I believe? It's been very hard to
Yeah.
separate myself from the religion. So maybe I can invite some of it back in. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah, I feel that way too. And for a while I was very much the person that was like that like still believed in God like very much and was like, God is in the rock music. God is in these things that give us the same feeling. Like it is God.
Mhm.
So I think
Mhm.
like that's valid to an extent too. And like people
Yeah.
who feel like that, like it's a good feeling sometimes to like really believe in something. I was listening to a podcast of a spiritual teacher that I used to listen to a lot as I was deconstructing that I just don't as much anymore because it just doesn't resonate like with where I'm at. But he was talking about like having dreams and like encounters with Jesus again. That's a very Christianese term that would trigger me. He doesn't
Mhm.
say it like that. I don't even know how he says
Right.
it. Like he'll just be like, I was chatting with Jesus the other day. He's a real funny dude. and blah blah blah. And I like got a little emotional because like sometimes I do miss that feeling.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
miss that feeling
Mhm.
of like having this this entity or energy or whatever that you believe is like a friend and is in your corner
Mhm.
and is there for you and is supporting you and everything you do. Like that's a really beautiful thing and a really beautiful feeling, and I get it.
Right.
I get why people like really cling to that and really stick with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's lots of
Absolutely.
paths out of cults, I think. And
Right.
but it is hard pulling it apart for yourself and figuring out what is safe for you and what feels good for you and what is a good belief for you that's doing the least harm to others, and like what was given to you by something else.
Right. And isn't that the whole crux of the matter is you
Mhm.
everyone's free. You're not in a cult, right? So you're free to
Yeah.
believe whatever you want, you know? You want to
Yeah.
yeah, you want to believe in, a water bottle, whatever, But
Yeah.
but I do look around and just see this world and be like, okay, I know dinosaurs exist. I know that the
Mhm.
world is round.
Yep.
Because there's been some speculation
Yep.
about the earth being flat. And I look around and I'm like, it is hard for me to believe that this just happened, but
Yeah.
I don't know for sure. A lot of people, have faith in different gods and different
Mhm.
origin stories. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Xenu or whatever, but I'm looking at my we got to talk a little bit about crafts before we end. Um,
Yes. Let's do
yeah,
it.
I really feel like crocheting saved my sanity, seriously, because when
Yeah.
I was in the cult, we every night we had to listen. It was like being in a concentration camp, kind of. We'd have to listen to these tapes over and over and over and over,
Mm.
indoctrination tapes, and some of it was very IBLP esque, and about the umbrella of authority and all that, and just all this just hellfire and brimstone over and over and over, and I just saw people just blanking out and kind of disassociating, and I would just sit there crocheting, crocheting, crocheting my blankets. It was very utilitarian stuff that I did, but now I
Yeah.
just do goofy joke stuff, which
I
is really fun.
love your Xenu crochets.
Thank you.
I do.
Thank you.
You know, I think that there could be like some psychological backing behind that, that it really saved your sanity by giving you something to focus on, because it would prevent you from dissociating entirely.
Mm,
Um,
mm, that's a
Having
good
something to
point.
focus on and something to do with your body, I think helps a lot when you're doing something that's trying really hard to take you out of your body.
Right.
I always was crafty and artsy growing up. My mom is very crafty, like very into gardening, very like artsy. And I actually, my first business that I tried to start when I was getting into like the business world, I did an Etsy shop and I did hand lettering. And I really
Oh,
loved that process. And at the time, it was something I was trying to be perfect at. Like I had a lot of like perfectionism wrapped up in it, and I was trying to do it for money and make money. And I think it was a way for my brain to like try to bring something in that was me, like into this culty world
yeah.
where I was like losing so much of
Right.
myself. And
Right.
so I completely gave that up when I got far enough into the business world, because I started trying to do coaching and spiritual teachings and like all of this stuff. And it was like,
Mhm.
that was silly. Like, I didn't have time for that. That was like really
Right.
low stuff for me to be dabbling in. And I completely
Mhm.
gave it up. And I was so wrapped up in what comes after this life and what is in heaven or what is in other dimensions or what is what is the Holy Spirit and all of these things that I think brings us like so much into our head. And then we're
Mhm.
having like the psychological like torture of being in a
Yeah,
cult like environment as well.
totally.
So as I left, I started just painting again and started trying to do something creative again. And I found these videos, these like little courses that were really inexpensive for just different abstract art techniques. I actually have all of my
I
art
love
behind
it.
me
Beautiful. Yes.
over there.
Beautiful.
And I started like, actually the first thing I saw was an iPad fluid art tutorial. Have you seen like the fluid art, like the resin fluid art that people pour on
Oh,
canvases and like move
yeah, the
it
poor art.
around?
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
someone
so
was
cool.
teaching, like, how to do that on Procreate, like, how to give that look, and
Oh.
I was doing it, and I was noticing that, like, I couldn't be perfect at it. That, like, there's only so much you can do to control, like, where the flow is going to
Mhm.
end up. If you do, like, the right settings, like, you really can only control so much, and something was happening where I noticed I was fighting my perfectionism, and I was doing something physical. So, like, I could
Mhm.
only it was bringing me back, like, down into my body, where I feel like I was living so long ignoring a lot of things about my
Right.
body.
Right,
And
right.
I think it really, like, saved me just as part of my healing journey, getting back into doing things that aren't perfect, doing things just based on feeling, doing things that, again, just that I could physically move into and didn't have to think about so much.
Right, right, right,
And
and it's not so like the you know, the
thank you,
world isn't
Kelly.
hanging in the balance. "Oh, are they
Yes.
free? Yeah." Kelly,
Yes, like,
do you know what Kelly
your
Copter is?
salvation isn't on the line
Yeah,
with this
it's like, it
painting.
doesn't really matter. Like, if I
Yeah.
skip a stitch, it's like, I'm not, not slipping
Yeah.
into the depths of hell, you know? Right.
Yeah.
It's just something to focus on, right, and bring you back ground you kinda ground you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
I,
it.
um,
It's
I found this girl on TikTok. Her name is Daniela Mestenik Young. She actually wrote a book called Uncultured, and she was raised in the Children of God, cult,
oh,
and then
oh,
she went on and was in the army for a long time, and Uncultured is drawing parallels between the Children of God cult and the US Army. And
interesting.
she also went to Harvard and got a degree in group psychology. So she's a scholar of cults and group psychology and extreme
Oh.
leadership. And she has a lot of really, really interesting tidbits from her research. And she's been talking recently about art as a process that she uses like through her healing journey. And she said that she's found that a lot of people in cults struggle with perfectionism because we were
Mhm.
trying to
Wow.
follow rules, and the cults require you to follow them perfectly, and if you don't, you're bad, you're wrong, you're like something's off, or you have a demon or
Right,
whatever. And
right,
then
yeah,
she said, when you leave, if you don't go down the deconstruction process and the healing process, then you try, like, at least this was true for her. She tried to prove that she was good enough, right? Like, she was
right,
good enough, even though the cult said that she wasn't. So she really struggled with perfectionism. And I found that to be true for me as well. And
right,
her art practice that she does is she puts a bunch of colors on a palette and uses one paintbrush and doesn't let herself rinse the paintbrush at all.
right,
And
right.
she has to use all the colors on her palette and doesn't get to rinse her paintbrush at all. And she has
Oh,
to
that's so
create
cool.
something out of that. And she was like, it is definitely like an anti-perfectionist exercise. And I've
Yeah, yeah.
noticed on TikTok also, there are so many this comment, art and music together. It's a personal world. There are
Mhm,
so many deconstructionists on TikTok that are making music about their religious upbringing or their religious trauma
nice.
or their deconstruction journey, and
Mhm.
of them, like, what it was like to come out as an adult after leaving their religion and all these things. And I think that, and Liz, like, we can talk about Liz Gale again and her book that she just
Yeah,
released.
Liz,
And,
I got it
a lot of people
yesterday, I started
write.
reading it.
Yes,
Yeah,
like, a lot of people
so excited.
write their stories, or Liz wrote um, a nonfiction book. Like, she wrote a story about being in the
Mhm.
cult as well. And I think that so many people find crafts and art and creativity after leaving a cult, especially women. Like, especially women find
Mhm.
some kind of, like, creative practice to be, like, a really significant part of their healing journey. And I love it. And I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, I was blown away when I started that little Facebook group, and I thought maybe I'd get, 12 people or something, and it's been a
Mhm.
few months, and there's, like, close to 600 people on the Facebook group, and there's so oh my god, like, there's so many creative people, and whether it's just everything, like, I think even things like cooking and gardening and just any
Mhm.
creative outlet, and a lot of survivors, I think, find that they're finding who they are and what their talents are and what their likes are, because I didn't even know what I liked. Somebody would ask me when I was in the cult, "What's your favorite color?" I don't know. I
Yeah.
couldn't think. Like, I wasn't allowed to have any preferences.
Right.
So, the fact that I was even, quote, "allowed to crochet," as long as I was doing things that were utilitarian, now I'm just like, "Hell, I'm crocheting poop emojis and penises and everything," you know? I'll crochet
Yes.
whatever I want, you know? But yeah,
Yes.
but it was like this cookie cutter thing where that I think that's why, cults often marginalize, people of other, religions, races, um
Uh-huh.
lifestyles, everything, you know, sexual orientation, because they want everyone to look alike, act alike,
Right.
be alike. They want a cookie cutter. So
Mhm.
that's why, like, anything that sets you apart as you, like something creative that you want to
Yeah.
do, is like, no, it's stifle. No, we have a planet to save. No,
Right. You don't
we
have
have
time.
people to evangelize. These people are going to hell. You need to get out in the street and preach the gospel. You know, it's
Yeah.
insane. Yeah.
Yeah, Daniela also said that her therapist recommended that she find a hobby that doesn't like produce anything. She actually knits and crochets a lot as well in her videos. She's knitting or crocheting in every video.
No, I think
And
I've seen her on, Cults to Consciousness, pretty sure,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah,
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 she
she
was
was.
knitting. She was
Yeah.
knitting. Yes! I'm like, I
Yes.
like her.
Yes, and
Yeah.
she says something similar about knitting, about it, like, saving her, like, while she was in the cult, because she
Mm,
learned while she was in the cult. But her therapist recommended to do something that doesn't produce a result. So, like, when you knit, you have, like, a product at the end, you're producing something, and, like, when I
yeah.
paint, my art, like, I have a finished product that I can display
Right,
or sell.
right,
And
right.
so she said she started getting into coloring books, and she like did adult coloring books because you just color on the page and you close the book and no one looks at it and
Right,
you
right.
can't sell it and you don't display
Well,
it and
for me, it's cooking, because then it just gets eaten, right?
yes, you eat
And
it.
I love to cook. I got
Yeah.
as soon as I left the cult, I got, satellite TV, and I just watched Rachel Ray and
Oh,
all of
love
the,
it.
Food Network, and I just started cooking, and I got, like, this is when Netflix used to send you DVDs in the mail,
Yeah.
and the very first ones I got was The French Chef with Julia, yeah, Julia
Yes.
Child, and we put beef bourguignon with it, you know. So she bottles of wine. Oh, I went nuts because I was like starving in the damn cult. So I like, you know, I like food. But yeah, it goes away. But it is nice to make something that is producible, but also just, yeah, it's gone too. It's all
Yeah.
good.
You're just doing it to do it. You're just
Yeah.
doing it to for the experience. Her therapist said for the process. Like you're doing it for the
Mm,
process of doing it, not for what you have at the end of the
right.
process.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I like to cook because I like to eat it, but also I like to just have everybody just leave me alone in the kitchen so I
Yeah.
can just kinda get in my groove, listen to music or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
kinda
I do think the
creative time.
process of cooking, like, yeah, is still like, there's still something my husband loves to cook, and so he does that as well, where he's like he is fascinated by the process, and, like, the fact
Right.
that you get to eat it at the end is a bonus, but he loves the process of being in the kitchen and, like,
Yeah.
playing with different recipes and different things and being there. Yeah, I
What
love
does
it.
he like to cook? I'll ask you that first. 'Cause Kelly says
Oh,
what
see, cooking was not my thing.
what
I
does your
did not
husband
get super into
what does your
cooking.
husband like to cook?
I like to eat Asian food, any type of Asian food. So
Oh my
he's been
god.
playing around a lot with different like fried rice and pad thai,
Mhm.
and he really loves to cook anything, anything at all, but we love Asian food.
That was my answer. I was gonna
Really?
say, I love making Thai food. Yeah, I
Oh,
make these,
yes.
and I like fusion. I like anything with,
Mhm.
like, kind of that umami, you know? But, yeah, one of my favorite
Yes.
things to make is I like making my favorite dinner is, chicken satays with, like, a peanut sauce, but I roll it in toasted sesame seeds, and then I make
Mhm.
my husband loves seafood, and, you know, you've had
I
crab
do
cakes,
too.
right? And living where you do, you probably had crab cakes. Well, I
Yep.
make shrimp cakes, and I put coconut on the outside. There's like coconut shrimp, but it's
Oh
like a
my god.
crab cake. Oh my god. I'll send you the recipe. Yeah,
Please,
really, really,
I
really
will send
good.
it to my husband. I
Yeah.
love eating the food
Those are
that
to
he
die
loves to
for.
Yeah, my ADHD doesn't let me do cooking for some
Oh,
reason.
really?
Like I can hyper focus on like certain crafty things, and then other ones, my
Right.
brain is like, absolutely not. This is too much, too many steps, too complicated. And it's really, I do cook things, like I do cook dinner and stuff. Um, but I just get like overwhelmed. Like it's very, I think maybe my perfectionism
Yeah, I
comes in
hate
a
to
little
bake.
bit too
I hate to
much.
bake because it's like that I just
Yeah,
feel
you
like
have to
it's
get it
just
right.
too technical. Yeah, I'm like,
Yes.
I'd rather just taste things and yeah. So,
Yeah.
Kelly,
I
come to
can do
Vermont
it.
and I'll cook for you, Kel.
I can do it if I can taste things as I go and I do my own thing. So, like, if
Yeah,
I
right,
learned
yeah.
more about it, I think I would be
Yeah,
okay with cooking.
yeah.
Because I can't, if I follow a recipe, I just have I like have a meltdown. It doesn't turn out well.
Yeah, my poor husband, he tries to follow a recipe, but it's like, this is from the 1950s. He's got his grandmother's cookbook, and it's like it calls for like 3 bouillon cubes plus like a tablespoon of table salt, and like something will call for like a tablespoon of cumin. And he's like, "Well, I'm making doublet, so I'm gonna put in like, a cup of cumin." I'm like, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
please, please don't."
That's like me. I'm like your husband.
That's so funny.
I
So I
see
have a
this
couple of
comment
stars.
here,
Yeah, go ahead.
from
You can pull
Leslie
it
that
up.
she found me on TikTok and,
Uh-huh.
wants to talk. If you
You can click
anyone,
it.
if you follow me on TikTok or Instagram, you can DM me, and I would love to go on any podcasts or, YouTubes or collab or whatever. But the
Nice.
best way to get a hold of me is DM on Instagram is the best, but I will likely get a TikTok DM as well.
Awesome. Yes, and you have a new YouTube channel, which is No
Yes.
Culty Vibes,
No culty
and
vibes.
we are streaming to it as we speak. So everyone, please like and subscribe over at Cassie
Please.
Marie's No Culty
Yes.
Vibes. So this
Yes,
is
I
so
would
much
love that.
fun.
And if you are on my channel from TikTok, I have been trying to tell my TikTok people to come over and see what's going on with SPTV if they haven't. So if you are watching this on my channel, please go follow Marilyn. Obviously, we have very similar stories, very similar
Yes.
feelings about all the art and stuff. So you will love Marilyn as well. What is your channel? Coffee Cults and Crafts?
Yes, coffee, cults, and
Okay.
craft. So the way I tell people you can remember it because it was from my Facebook group, and I said, well, I'll just do my email. My Gmail is coffeecultsandcrafts at
Mhm.
Gmail, and then the YouTube channel was something that I didn't anticipate. It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
So I've been
I
doing it for
love that.
2 months
I'm gonna go
now.
find your
But
Facebook group too.
yeah, do it, do it. Then maybe
Yeah.
I can PM you because I don't really have Instagram and TikTok. I did make a TikTok this morning because my sons have a Pomeranian um, that has a TikTok and he's got like 700 followers. The
That's
little Pomeranian.
amazing. I love dog TikToks. I follow a
It's
lot of
at
animals on
it's
TikTok.
at Punchy the Palm, just so you know.
I'm gonna I'm gonna follow it.
Punchy the Palm. He's more famous than any of us. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
So everybody subscribe to Cassie, and I would love to have you back. I think this is great. I feel like we just scratched the surface of all this
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. We
It's
coulda talked
crazy.
so much more about literally any one of the things that we said.
Any subject. Yeah.
Yes.
And some
We'll do it
questions
again
I'm
for
gonna
sure.
click on here. OBG Foster question. If someone has epilepsy in that church, would they be considered blessed or go to a doctor like they should? That's a good question. What do you think, Cass?
So in my church, it was fine to go to doctors. We weren't I actually think this is a little bit similar to Scientology. I've heard some ex-Scientologists talk about like it's fine to go to a doctor. Um some I've seen some Assemblies of God in Pentecostal churches where it's not okay to go to doctors. The problem is they think most physical illnesses are spiritual illnesses. So there is a lot of like you can heal it with prayer. So they would likely think that they had a demon in them of some kind, but not like the demon of epilepsy. It would be like a demon of something that was causing the epilepsy. And like with enough prayer and soul searching and spiritual enlightenment and getting enough people to pray for you, it would be like the idea would be that you should be able to spiritually heal yourself. And it's fine to go to the doctors in the meantime. The problem is that some people take this really, really far and will not go to doctors because they believe that they can heal themselves spiritually, and they think that the doctors will like counteract that or mess with that or make that harder, or they just think like, why go to the doctor and pay the money, because
Right.
especially like doctors are expensive and not a lot of people have access, and there's so many issues around that. So people will often say, why go to the doctor when I can just heal this spiritually? And I can't get too much into the story, but I do have people close to me that have been in my circle that have passed away from treatable, curable issues
Mhm.
because they wanted to do spiritual healing and things like that instead of go a more traditional scientific route.
Right.
So it can go a
Yeah.
lot of ways in this world for
Mhm.
sure. Was that kind of your experience, Marilyn?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't forbidden, but it was more like if you have enough faith, you could be healed.
Right.
So it was kind of like, do you, you know, do you want to go the route of trusting God and
Mhm.
having enough faith to move mountains and heal and be healed? And I think that they said it was like a personal thing, and they didn't shun people for it, but you still felt that vibe, like,
Yeah.
um, there was pressure. There was pressure
Yeah, there was
to
pressure, and if you did
Mhm.
heal something spiritually, like, you were very, like, praised in that community. You
Yeah,
were looked at
yeah,
very highly, and, "Oh my god, they're so
mhm,
spiritual, they're so close to God, God healed them, they're so h blessed and
yeah,
highly favored," if we're gonna
yeah,
go into the language, the Pentecostal language of it all. So you were also, like, really, um just love like held to such a high standard if you were able to heal things. And I knew several people in our church that claimed that they were going around and healing people and praying for healing. They were seeing people like broken limbs healed and like were claiming all of these things. And like later we found out they were lying. Like they were entirely
mhm,
lying about all of that.
yep,
So that also
totally,
gives like an environment for gurus and like grifters and cult leaders, wannabe cult leaders, to go around and make grandiose claims so that people will think they're closer to God than the average person. Most healings I saw were lies,
yeah.
like just
Well,
entirely flat out lies.
Jim Jim Jones, before the whole Kool-Aid situation, he was actually ordained by the Independent Assemblies of God denomination. He was ordained as an Assemblies of God minister, and he
Mhm,
did the same thing. He did the false healings and all the faith stuff. He had his secretary pretend to be in a wheelchair. I mean,
mhm.
it was just crazy, but yeah, it's definitely I think across the board, a lot of cults have their own brand of that, like with Jehovah's
Yeah,
Witnesses, with the no blood policy. Oh my God. Like that just gets me so
yes.
upset
Yeah,
about children's acting like,
JW.
oh, look, this little 8-year-old had so much faith in God that he died because he'd rather die than take blood. He
Oh,
didn't
that
make
makes me
that
mad.
decision. His
Mhm,
parents made this decision because they were pressured from the church.
mhm.
It's just and
There's a
they
great
turn them into martyrs.
podcast. Yeah, there's a great podcast called Heaven Bent. You should be able to search it on any podcast platform. She did a deep dive into Bethel and Reading because they do a lot of healing stuff. They actually were in the news because unfortunately, one of the worship leaders' daughters died very young of something. I don't think it was something curable. I think it was something that would have happened anyway. But they
Mhm.
prayed over this poor girl for weeks for God to bring her back to life. Like that's how deeply they believed in
Wow.
laying on hands in prayer, is they thought
Wow.
that God would revive her. And that, like, I hate even telling that story and thinking about it. It's so heartbreaking to think of parents like holding out hope that God is going
Yeah.
to bring their child back to life. But she did like some investigative work, and scientists have studied speaking in tongues. The like scientific term for speaking in tongues is called glossolalia.
Yep. Yeah.
And they have studied it because, like you described in the beginning, that in the Bible it said they were speaking their own language. Well, scientists have shown that you can map out a language scientifically, and speaking in tongues has no linguistic properties. Like
Right.
there's nothing that can make it sound like an actual language or be something that can be like understood by anyone. And they've also done stories on laying of hands type healing, because New Age believes in this as well. Like Reiki is a thing, and
Mhm.
there are a lot of like New Age beliefs that you can heal through just laying on hands, or something
Touch
along those lines.
assist. Touch assist
Yeah,
on,
and they've shown that
Scientology. Feel
there
my finger. Yeah. Yep.
yeah. Yeah. They've shown that there can be benefits in the brain. Like there is some type of something that happens in your brain when you get spiritual healing, when you have like Reiki, they've done studies on Reiki, laying of hands. They've shown that like there are some like placebo effects of it, but they've never been able to show that like what they claim to be healing is completely
Right.
healed by laying on of hands. So it doesn't have like any detrimental effect, and it can have some positive effects. The detrimental effect is that it's never like
Oh,
cured
mhm.
a curable disease. So if you do not go to the doctor to cure your curable disease and rely on the laying of hands, you are like 95% likely to perish from said curable disease. That's like where the harm is. So I find that
Right.
fascinating. I love that
Yeah.
people have like studied this and tried to
Yeah.
show like
Absolutely.
what goes on.
Absolutely. Um,
Yeah.
Marilyn, what is the strangest thing you've seen? Oh my God. What comes to mind? Probably, I don't know if strange and disturbing. One of the most strangest was we had this those visiting ministers, man. They were like the most crazy, right? And in your church too, the visiting um evangelists, whatever. We had this one woman, her ministry was called Grace and Vessels, and she came in a big like tour bus, like a rock star. And she had like a
Mhm.
big flower in her hair and a full length gown and like a sweet, sweet accent and stuff. She came to the front of this congregation and everybody was lined up to be blessed, right? And she just went and just touched everybody on the forehead and they fell
And they
backwards. But
yes.
we didn't have enough ushers to catch everybody. So
No.
some people just like biffed backwards. Yeah. I think
No.
one lady got a concussion. Yeah.
Oh
But
no.
that wasn't
That's
all.
terrible.
And then somebody had a demon in him and he was like frothing at the mouth. Oh yeah, that was a wild. And I remember she came I think at least 3 times. But yeah,
Yeah.
Grayson Vessels coming to visit. That was probably the most wild times, but so
That's
sad.
fascinating. I think they've also done studies on, casting out demons before. Like, they've tried
Mhm.
psychologically, they've tried to make some kind of sense of that, and I would love to read and, like, look into some of that scientifically, because like, I personally, this is a personal opinion, I'm not saying this is the case, I am not trying to yuck anyone's yum when it comes to, like, what you believe is going on with that.
Right.
I
Right.
personally believe a lot of times people are having some kind of psychotic break, like foaming
Yep.
at the mouth, because like some people are
Yep.
experiencing something, right? Like something
Yep.
is going on with them. It is not
Mhm.
normal to have those behaviors, whether you believe there's a demon inside you or not, or whether there is a demon inside you or not. Something is happening to a person, right? And in my experience, from what I've seen with a lot of people, I think a lot of times people are experiencing a type of like psychosis when
Right.
they're in that position. Sometimes they're pushed into that. Sometimes they have it like something already that pushes them to that. But I would love to
Mhm.
like look into that and see what people have found when studying.
Yeah. I think that, over the years of being in that church, one of the, men that supposedly had demons in him was also homeless. He had a lot of, mental health issues and things, and it's like, you ever think it might not be demons? You ever think maybe he needs, a place to live, good meals, and a little bit of, mental health services, you know? It's like, "Oh, we froze again?" Oh, sorry, Cassie. Hopefully you won't get bumped out. But it's that darn storm, the coastal storm. I'll just read a couple of questions while she's coming back. Uh, Bison 5360, I left the church after going 15 years because they started changing all the bylaws to fit what they wanted to change their views to. The church is no longer there. Wow. Yeah, it is like kind of like that mixture thing where people just put it all in a on a petri dish and presto, they got their own religion. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm glad you got out. Definitely. Hopefully Cassie will be back soon. Come back to us. Steve in Britain, the rapture is the belief that all Christians suddenly disappear in a big poof moment all at once, which will usher in the 7 years of tribulation. Yes, that's what we were taught. And when I would lose track of one of my family members, um, I'd be like, oh, the rapture happened. And then the 7 years of tribulation, if you didn't take the 666 on your forehead or your hand, your right, I think it was your right hand or your forehead, then you would, you know, you would end up being martyred. And if you did take the mark, then you would go to HE double two sticks. I mean, I know you can say hell on here, but we always call it HE double two sticks. All right, Michelle R. Some indigenous cultures, um, so in some indigenous cultures, mistakes in crafts, weaving, jewelry, etc., are embraced since we are not perfect, and the Creator made us imperfect. Yeah, like I used to think of it that way too. I can't remember. I think it was an older lady that told me when you're doing crafts, not that I have to purposely make a mistake. Talking about crafts again. Not that I have to purposely
Sorry.
miss a stitch or make a mistake, but that's what makes it unique, right? It's like you make a mistake, just keep going. Don't do what they
Mhm.
call in crocheting frogging it. When you rip it out, it makes the sound like rip it, rip it, rip it, rip it, rip it. They call it
Yeah.
frogging. I'm like, I don't frog unless it's really bad. But if I
Yeah.
miss one little stitch, it's not the end of the world, right?
Mm.
We're imperfect. We're not in a cult
Mm.
anymore. Oh, you want to read this one, Cassie? Because I don't know anything about Reiki, but it sounds
Yes, I
fascinating.
am a Reiki master and do energy healing, but we are taught to never say we are actually medically healing anything. You have to go to a doctor. Yes, so that is what I would call like ethical
Right.
practice of like a spiritual practice. I think
Right.
that I think that's totally fine. Like it's totally fine to be perfectly honest, perfectly upfront. I think Reiki, like I said, they've like scientifically shown that like it can have a really positive effect on the brain to believe you are doing something to heal yourself.
Yeah.
And there could be like I said, I'm more agnostic atheist these days, so don't take that to mean that there's not like spiritual effects as well. There totally can be. I just can't go down. I'm just not into that. I can't go down that rabbit hole right now.
Yep.
But I think as long as you're like, we're gonna do what we do here, and if it's something perfectly curable, please like go to a doctor. And as long as like you cover yourself and make that very clear that like you won't think they're a better person if they don't go to the doctor or anything along those lines. I think that is a perfectly ethical practice of like a spiritual practice. That's my opinion though. I'm not an
Absolutely.
expert on any of this. So that's my
That
disclaimer.
makes a lot of sense.
Don't
No,
listen to anything this culty lady says on the
that makes a
internet. That's
lot of
just my
sense.
opinion.
This culty lady. No culty vibes, lady.
Yeah.
I I have to admit, I've been so distracted by that microphone because it's the cutest thing ever. I
Thanks.
wanna crochet a little fuzzy thing for
Do
mine.
it. Oh my gosh, Marilyn, that would be so cute. That would be so cute.
Well, I don't know if I'll wreck it.
I don't
Will
think
the
so.
sound still go in?
It
Oh, I'm gonna
should,
try
but
it.
this like dampens the sound. So like there's a
Right.
whole big like thing on top of like this
I
microphone.
love it. I love it.
Yeah. I like I
My
like the fuzzy ones because I think they're cute.
it reminds me of my new puppy. I have this Pomeranian puppy. He's only 9 weeks old, and he's literally like a round gray. He's a wolf sable. He's round and gray. So I
That's
felt
so
like
cute. I
and,
love that.
it reminds me of, I don't know if you know who Denver Steve-O is, but he's one of those one of the
Uh-huh.
guys on SBTV. He's like, "Where'd you get that tribble?" Because in Star Trek, they have these little things that look like your microphone, and in one of the Star Trek episodes, they just like they're like multiplying all over the ship, and they're just these little tiny little furry puff balls. So I
I
love your
love that.
tribble
Yeah, I
microphone.
love this because it's cute and fuzzy, and I like holding it because I talk so much with
Yeah,
my hands.
I love
So, like,
it.
it helps me not be,
Me
like,
too.
too, like, distracting with my hands when I don't have it. Both of my hands are going like this, like, all the time.
Do you get confused with the direction of the screen? Because whenever I move like this, I try to move it over like that, but I'm going like this because it's a mirror, it's an opposite thing. It's
Yeah,
just
I
taking me
actually
forever.
because I, like, do TikToks so much, like, I use the front camera because I do a lot of, like,
Oh, so
green
you
screen stuff, so I'm
yeah.
used to seeing myself mirrored now. So now I move, like, with the mirrored direction, and when it's not mirrored, I get really confused.
Well, I can't wait to this afternoon, this is what I'm gonna do. Oh, Denver Steve-O, the Tribbles.
Hi, Denver Steve-O.
Poop yeah, poop emoji guy. He says Osa smells like poo. I've got some Osa merch. It says from his channel. It says
Oh
Osa
my
smells
gosh.
like poo.
I
Yeah.
love that.
But
They
I
do.
can't wait. I started a TikTok or not started one, but I actually subscribe or whatever. What do you say?
Yeah.
I
Follow. I think it's
downloaded yeah,
follow
yeah,
on
yeah.
TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah, I never did TikTok at all. Like I've never been on it. So I
Yeah.
actually downloaded the app today. That's what I did. I downloaded the
I
app
love it.
and I gotta follow you. Are you at No Culty Vibes on there? Or what are
So
you
on TikTok,
on
I'm
there?
at and TikTok and Instagram, I'm at the dot Cassie Marie.
The dot Cassie Marie. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's in the chat. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
I'll do that. So you and Punchy, I'm gonna follow. Punchy is the
Love it.
puppy, the pom puppy.
Yes, I'm gonna follow Punchy too.
Yeah, and get on Facebook because then we can chat that way too. Because
Yes,
email is so hard. It's like, how do I
it is.
like so hard to chat on email. But
Yeah.
let's just do a couple more quick ones and then Tampa B man. My mom is the only good Christian I've ever known. Unconditional love. Didn't think it was her place to anyone, judge anyone, but to love everyone.
I
I
love
think
that.
that's a I think that's a great place to wrap up, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I love that.
yeah, yeah.
Love it,
It's
love it.
just
This was so
that's
fun.
what it is. Yeah, let's do this again. I
Let's do
mean,
it again.
I love talking cults and
Yes.
crafts.
Yeah, we'll have to
I
do one, and
can't
I'll share with you everything I learned about, like, the history of, like, the Assemblies of God and, like, why I
yeah.
think they produce all these cults. We'll have to chat about that.
Okay. Yeah, I've got some thoughts about that too. But yeah, I haven't done
Yeah.
any actual research. It's just kind of like at night, I'm just like, yeah, this cult, that cult. And just, yeah, that
Yes.
would be awesome. So, everybody, put a one in the chat if you want us to do another Pentecostal uh,
Please.
thing. We have this
Yes.
thing of putting one in the chat. Talk about that later.
I think I know what you're referring to. Love it.
Oh, I see some ones. All right.
Love it.
All right. We love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cassie. Everyone like and
Thank
subscribe
you.
to
Yes.
Cassie, her YouTube channel, her Instagram, her TikTok, all the things.
Thank you. And
All
everyone
the
like and
things.
subscribe Marilyn too if you haven't
Thank
already.
you. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.